Hello. Good morning.
Good morning. Again.
And welcome to Vale of Whitehorse District Council Cabinet meeting this morning on the 8th of March. We're here in Abbey House in Abingdon, and thank you all for attending today. I'd like to start with item number. I've just heard that Councillor Fawcett is going to be a little bit late, but he is supposed to be here in person. Have you had any other apologies?
We have no other apologies, Chair.
Will you be doing the roll call?
Yes. So I will read Cabinet members in alphabetical order if you can.
Attending online.
Councillor Mark Coleman.
Present in the room.
Councillor Andy Crawford.
Present in the room.
Councillor Lucy Edwards.
Present in the room.
Councillor Neil Fawcett will be 10 minutes late. Councillor Andy Forsham.
Present in the room.
Councillor Diana Lagova.
Present in the room.
Councillor Helen Pickhills.
Present in the room.
And Councillor Bethany Thomas.
Present in the room, thank you. Now we've had apologies. Going on to item number 2, declarations of interest. I have not heard of any. Has anybody got any declarations of interest that they would like to state now? If you do, if you think of something halfway through, please let us know. It can be noted. Item number 3, urgent business and chairs and announcements. I don't think there are any, but if you'd like to run through the emergency.
Yes. For the benefit of everybody here, the emergency exit, should the fire alarm go, is through the door to the right, and the exit is on the right-hand side. But any questions, please follow myself or Steve.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there are no plans.
There are no plans.
Yes, so we, if you hear something, follow the instructions. Item number 4, public participation. Now, we don't have anybody as such speaking here or online, but I believe we have a statement from a member. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Are you going to read that out?
I will read it out. Thank you. So, Cabinet, this is a statement by Councillor Sarah James, member for the Hendreds Ward, which borders the east side of Wantage. Councillor James would like to raise concerns about the decarbonisation projects at Wantage Leisure Centre and at the Whitehorse Leisure and Tennis Centre. She notes that this item is identified as affecting Abingdon Peachcroft and Wantage Charlton wards, but these are centralised facilities, each serving many wards. Her concerns apply to the item as a whole, but more particularly as ward councillor for Hendry's ward, the impact on the Wantage Leisure Centre is her concern. Wantage is the main facility and service centre for most of her ward, and its leisure centre is particularly important to her residents. She is also a member of the Climate Emergency Advisory Committee. The committee was briefed on progress towards decarbonising our leisure centres at its last committee meeting, and Councillor James was very impressed with the progress made in securing funds and developing a plan to carry this out. This council has made tackling climate change a key priority and has firm targets to reduce its own carbon emissions to net zero by 2030, which isn't that far off. Our leisure centres are our largest sources of carbon emissions, so the planned work to decarbonise them is key to meeting our pledge to residents. It will also reduce the operational costs of these leisure centres in future, which will help protect our ability to keep providing these facilities to our communities. Councillor James was very concerned to see that there are now risks to the project arising from the fact that we are still in a tender process for the project delivery, when we are less than a month from the end of the first year of the project grant. These risks include losing some of the first year grant funding if it is not spent on time, and if that happens, it could reduce our chance of being awarded similar grants in future. Losing some of the grant risks the delivery of the project as planned. Councillor James would like to ask the Cabinet Member for Finance and Property what happened. We accepted the grant well before the start of this financial year. The 6-week delay due to the procurement challenge in September does not explain how we've now ended up with running a tendering process that closes today on the 8th of March. And that concludes Councillor James's statement.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate you reading that out. Councillor Crawford, that was directed towards you. Would you like to make a statement?
So this is a bit weird, isn't it? Because this is apparently it's a statement, but it has a question mark in it.
Yes.
But I'm happy. Maybe it would be more appropriate that in my introduction of the item, I address that particular statement and try to answer the implied question within it, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Acceptable to all.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll do that later on.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to thank Councillor James for contributing to the cabinet meeting, and as Councillor Crawford states, he will address it in his introduction. So item number 5, recommendations from other committees. Now we don't have any recommendations as we've had no committee meetings since then. Everybody's had a little bit of time off it, isn't it? Then we'll go straight on to item number 6, which is the empty homes policy, and that will be introduced by Councillor Pighouse. Thank you.
So, this morning we've been asked to approve the adoption of the new empty homes policy. The empty homes policy is a platform to bring empty homes back into use, which will benefit owners, potential tenants, and the community. It supports our corporate objective of providing the homes people need. It's the first time the council has had an empty homes policy, and it demonstrates our commitment to increasing the availability of affordable housing, particularly for low-income households at risk of homelessness. It benefits empty home owners, potential tenants, and the wider community by bringing empty homes back into use. And it takes an environmentally friendly approach to the housing issues by using existing housing stock. So the aim of the policy is to positively engage with empty homeowners to bring homes back into use. So in the past, officers have only reacted to reports of empty homes from residents, neighbours. So this policy is more reactive, more, I think the word, proactive. That's it. Thank you. So the aim is to work with the homeowners, and enforcement action would only be considered as a last resort. The empty homes officer, working with communications team, will promote the incentives available to bring empty homes back into use. And while the policy may bring a relatively small number of homes back into use, each home secured will help the council tackle the rising tide of homelessness. And just to reassure members, the cost of the policy, including a 2 years empty homes officer post, will be fully met within existing budgets. We've got Paul Fielding is online in case we have any questions. I can't answer. Sorry, Paul.
Thank you.
Can I just say what the recommendations are? It's recommended that Cabinet approves the adoption of the empty homes policy, and subject to approval of the policy, to delegate authority to the head of the housing and environment to make minor amendments to the policy in the future.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I was shocked about how many things this council does, because this is one of those things that obviously it is within our realm of responsibility, but this aspect is I think it's a brilliant initiative, and I'm really happy, and I was going to check with you, but you've made it very clear that is a proactive response to this issue. So we're not just responding to complaints about empty properties, but we'll have an officer in place to actually go out and investigate and talk to homeowners. And that is a brilliant thing. I think it's just a good news story as far as I'm concerned for this. It seems to benefit so many people, the property owner, the council, and particularly residents, vulnerable residents who may be in need of a home. So can I open it up for discussion? Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Gover.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think, just reading the documents, I've seen somewhere like Wales is open to give the loan to the owner to help them to bring, just back to life. so to speak. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, just these loans from which budget they will come from? Do we have budget for those loans, or we need to kind of to seek additional money to provide those loans?
I think that's probably already budgeted, but could I ask Paul to clarify?
Yeah, we do have currently have a relatively small budget that can look at home loans, but also any other loans that we would make would be set against the property. So if we needed to borrow or use money to do that, it would be set against the property. But we do have a set aside budget that's relatively small at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Edwards. Everybody came at once.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Edwards.
Mine's a question. Do we have a squatting problem in the Vale of Whitehorse?
I don't believe so.
As in, I guess this is, obviously it's a positive story. I completely agree. Therefore, if we did have a problem, this would go some way to mitigate that. That would be the second part of the question.
Could I ask Paul?
Yeah, I'm not aware that we particularly have a huge squatting problem, but as is indicated in the report, there are a reasonable number of properties that are empty, and they can be empty for a number of reasons. Now, there might be people squatting in there we wouldn't necessarily know, but most of them we presume are empty, or at least not properly used, and we want to bring them back into proper use. So we don't think that squatting is the issue, but we want to make sure that empty properties are brought back to use properly.
Thank you. Councillor Forsham and then Councillor Coleman.
Thank you. I'm really encouraged to see this policy. I think it's a very positive, proactive move. And I think we should be making good use of our communications channels to explain to our residents how this is our response. I've been contacted by residents who are concerned about property. They believe there were council houses unused, which it actually says a number of things about lack of information, lack of understanding. It turned out to be these were MOD homes that were being refurbished. So getting the message out there that this is what we're doing and that we're not just behaving reactively, but taking positive steps to bring as many homes into use as possible is a really good thing.
Yeah, because presumably by acting proactively, we have the potential to increase the number of houses that are coming online through this proactive method. Is that right, Paul?
Yeah, the aim is that even if there was one house or home that is currently not being used as a home but just sat there empty, for every one that we can work with the owner to get it back into use in some way, and then we're obviously focused on those properties that we hope can be then rented out, let out in some way, ideally for people who are homeless or people who need housing. Then that's just increasing our housing stock generally. So we're doing lots of different things to address the housing problem, and this is just another one of those. But as is outlined in the report, it also has positive impacts for local neighbourhood, on that local environment as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Coleman.
Thank you. So I think the report makes it clear the numbers that we're looking at here are relatively low. I think in para 11 it talks about the period January 22 to December 23, so i.e. 2 years, the team received only 4 complaints of empty houses in the Vale. So this isn't a significant number, but I always like to look at the extremes. In the following paragraph, it says, where there is no good reason for the property remaining empty, enforcement action effectively then may be taken. And I'd like to link that with the finance paragraph at number 19, paragraph 19, where it says there would also need to be consideration of costs associated with any proposed enforcement action. So I accept that there's probably, let's take those 4 properties. Hopefully all the owners would be on side with the scheme and we would not require enforcement, but let's assume there was one.
My question is, who is going to determine what is a reasonable reason for the property to be empty and for what period? And then the second one is, how are we going to fund that enforcement activity? It says that it needs to be considered, but the finance paragraph doesn't actually say where it will come from.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. So you're right. The complaint talks about the relatively the report talks about relatively low numbers of complaints at the moment, but that is because we've not been proactively promoting this, and so people might not necessarily know where to let us know about empty properties that are there. So hopefully we can find out about more empty properties. The aim is that the officer that we're going to get in place is to be proactive and positive in how they work with homeowners to understand the reason why it's empty and how it can be brought back into use. So there might be properties that are empty but for good reason. They might be having long-term development works, or there might be plans to sell them, but the owner just hasn't sold it. We're obviously not going to take any action in those circumstances. Where there's circumstances where the owner has a property that's empty but doesn't know the best thing to do or isn't sure how to bring it back into use, that is where we can positively work with them and get that property back into use. The use of empty dwelling management orders or CPOs is really very much a last resort, where a property might be empty, causing lots of problems, but the owner isn't wanting to work positively with us, and that's where we then step into the enforcement role that our private sector housing and consider that. But that really is a last resort. It isn't something that we as a council would be wanting to take, except in very rare circumstances, because it means that we then have the responsibility for bringing that property back into use and how we handle it, and that isn't something that we intend to do.
Okay, so the last bit of that question was, but were we to be in that position, it says we need to consider where we would fund the enforcement action from. Have we considered it? Where would that funding come from?
In that scenario, the funding would have to, the enforcement work would be done within the existing officer cohort, so we would use existing officers to do that. The costs of running the housing, though, would need to be taken, understood as part of any plan to do an EDMO. So we would have to understand what that implications would be on council finances and have a source of funding to do that. But as I said, because it's not something we're planning to do, we haven't got a set route for doing that at the moment.
It's a low risk. It's a low risk to this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, my point was to Mark's point, actually, that I do have a case currently open in my ward to do with this exact issue, and a resident has brought that to our attention because they're trying to sell their property adjacent to a certain property, so they're losing money, thousands, and this property is exactly the kind of extreme scenario that Paul has mentioned here. And I think that we can use these case studies, I think, as positive, and to learn from them as how we deal with them. Ultimately, there is a cost, officer time, and this is something that's been alerted to me in my ward.
Thank you. Does anybody have any further questions? I think the report's been very well put together, and I appreciate Paul's work and Bill as well and his team in getting this together. So if we are to just go over the recommendations, so it's recommended that Cabinet approves the adoption of the empty homes policy, and be subject to approval of the policy to delegate authority to the head of housing and environment to make minor amendments to the policy in the future. Is everybody happy to agree to those recommendations?
Agree.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So now we move on to item number 7, the Whitehorse Leisure and Tennis Centre and Wantage Leisure Centre Stalex Phase 3B decarbonisation project. item. And I will leave it to Councillor Crawford to introduce. Thank you, Councillor Crawford.
Thanks, Chair. So good morning. First, I'd just like to answer the implied question within Councillor James's communication.
Thank you.
If officers had not received a procurement challenge as outlined within the report, or the funder, SADC, was able to permit rollover of funds from year 1 to year 2, which they have done in the past, we would be in a very different position. There will, however, be a lesson learned exercise on the process to date, as officers do for all projects through the internal project management process that is reviewed by the senior management team. I agree that our leisure centres are amongst our largest sources of carbon emissions, and this project to decarbonise them remains a corporate priority. It is important that officers focus on the immediate issue of contract delivery and the actions within the report to mitigate the risk. Thank you again for the question. I think we'll probably give a written reply as well, will we?
Yes, absolutely.
So I might want to tidy that up a little bit. That's my immediate reaction. So if I can now introduce the report itself, that seeks Cabinet approval to award a main contractor in respect of the Whitehorse Leisure Centre and Whitehorse Leisure and Tennis Centre in Abingdon and Montage Leisure Centre for the decarbonisation project, following a two-stage procurement process and seeking delegated authority to the head of the corporate landlord in consultation with the head of finance and myself. So by way of background, the Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme, which will now be called PSDS, Phase 3B, was announced by the government in August 22. The scheme allows local authorities and other public sector bodies to apply for funding to install low carbon heating systems at sites where the heating systems are end of life. Following a successful bid process, the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero has made funding available for £5.9 million to assist the Vale of Whitehorse District Council's decarb programme by carrying out these projects. I think that's probably the biggest grant that this council's ever received for a bid like that. So really well done to the officers. An ICMD was approved early 23 to accept the grant and terms and conditions set out for part of that grant, and agreed the financial commitment, our own financial commitment of 2.1 million towards delivery of both projects, which is funded via Community Infrastructure Levy, SIL, and Oxfordshire County Council, OCC contributions. This will in part be shared with OCC, who are required to contribute 50% of costs towards projects at Montage Leisure Centre through a joint use agreement, and agreed with the OCC property team as part of their budget spend. As I mentioned earlier, upon awarding the tender for the consultant, the council received a procurement challenge. Now that the challenge was unsuccessful, it did create an unforeseen delay in the consultancy award of around 6 months, which has impacted the procurement timetable. Officers are proposing to progress with the implementation stages of both leisure centres decarbonisation projects under 2 separate contracts. Stage 1 is to carry out the technical design up to REBA Stage 4 for decarbonisation works at the leisure centres through what is called a pre-construction services agreement. And then Stage 2, the design and build construction works on the Whitehorse Leisure and Tennis Centre, installing solar PV, air source heat pumps, and at Wantage Leisure Centre, installing solar PV, air source heat pumps, and external insulated cladding and upgrading glazing. The table within the report outlines the timescales set within the ITT document, which went out to procurement in last month for the Stage 1 contract, and the award expected next week following an initial expression of interest process. I think the expression of interest closes in approximately an hour and 6 minutes. I also understand that officers will be working over the weekend to assess these so that we can come to a decision hopefully by Monday. As I've said, the SADC Phase B grant of 1.8 million in year 1 cannot be rolled over into year 2, even though it is for the same project. This means that there is a risk that this amount will not be fully spent by the 31st of March. And should this happen, the council will either need to find alternative funding to fund the gap itself, reduce the scope of the project, or terminate the project. Delivery of both projects has estimated revenue savings of 46,000 annually for the Wantage Leisure Centre and 92,000 annually here in Abingdon. Whilst the immediate impact may not be achieved in the current leisure contract, these savings improve the operational delivery of the new contract from 31st of August 2026, when current contract expires. Officers have, however, been able to draw down funds from the year one grant to the value of £166,000, and officers have forecasted that further spend prior to current procurement exercise be included a further £611,000, resulting in a remaining £1.04 million in the year one allocation. By awarding to the main contractor in line with the timeline in paragraph 14 of the report in front of you, officers expect to be able to commit the majority of the remaining allocation for current financial year. In summary, because of the procurement challenge, the council has not been able to progress the project as set out in the original timeline. The recommendations before you today will enable the council to agree to year one funding from Salix for this project and the two-stage procurement process, and will ensure the appropriate award of the main contractor. I've almost finished. This will provide the best opportunity for the contractor to be able to complete the works in a timescale that allows the commitment of the remaining grant funds in year one and to deliver within the approved budget for the project. If the tenders that will be turned later today exceed the agreed budgeted amount, officers will seek further support on the next steps and will need to liaise with the funder. In the first instance, officers will be expecting the items set out under section 3, payment of the grant, referred to in the legal section, by seeking a request for an additional grant from Salix to cover the shortfall in year 2, or to adjust the project programme and measures to remain within budget by amending the scope of the project that would impact on the level of carbon savings. These investor save decarb projects remain a priority to the officer team, and I look forward to its delivery. Joined online by Andrew Busby and Head of Development Corporate Landlord, and by Ben Wayman somewhere, hopefully, our leisure facilities team leader, to answer any technical questions you may have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That's a very comprehensive introduction.
I'll test you on it later.
I think I agree with you that when we received news that we were successful in this bid originally, it was amazing news to have been awarded almost £6 million. Obviously, it was a disappointment that there was a challenge to the procurement process last year. But I am very grateful for now getting to this point, that we're considering it today and pushing ahead to make sure that we don't lose any of this funding resource going forward. So can I open it up to questions? I think there will be quite a few. Councillor Pickles, I think, was the first in. Councillor Pickles.
Just a clarification, particularly in the light of the earlier statement from Councillor. Did you say in your introduction there was a delay of around 6 months?
No, the delay because of the challenge was a 6-week delay.
6 weeks, yeah, but it's compounded into a lot longer. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Would you want to expand on? Sorry.
No, I just sort of thought it says 6 weeks, but I thought you said the overall delay was 6 months, and I just wanted to. I
don't think I used the phrase 6 months.
I might have misheard.
There's a lot of words there, weren't there?
Yeah,
there were a lot of words, so yes, just wanted clarification.
Councillor Colvin.
So I apologise. I think I was a victim of the migration to MS 365. So the email I sent out asking for some clarification clearly didn't get out. Can I just go to paragraph 6, where, as part of the PSDS scheme, we had to meet the like-for-like costs of the fossil fuel heating system replacement, which is 12% for the full cost, which is higher. It said that the combined Vale site is around 10% of the scheme cost, and therefore additional council contribution was required to meet that criteria. How does that relate to the table that's in paragraph 7? Is that separate to the figures that are in 7, which is effectively the grants, and it does talk about the Vale contribution, but the Vale contribution looks like about 23%. So I'm not sure where that 10% piece on paragraph 6, how does that relate to paragraph 7, or is it doesn't at all?
My assumption is it's part of it, but maybe Andrew or Ben can fill in the detail there.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. Yes, good morning. It is included in that table of costs. It's just a bit of detail to provide a breakdown on the criteria of the grant terms and conditions.
Thank you. And And then my second question, let's find my notes. In paragraph 33, it refers to the environment of, it says 200,000 £200,000, and as per the constitution, but in the constitution in paragraph 86 it talks about financial procedures in the and there it's £20,000, not £200,000. So can I just ask, am I misreading that, or is it something completely different?
That's a question. Sorry, go ahead, Andrew. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you, Councillor Crawford. Yeah, it's a question I can get clarification for, but I believe what's in front of you there is correct. But if there's it needs to be a correction, I'll make sure that's carried out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that we're not looking to do environment, but there is a bit of a difference between 20,000 and 200,000. So
absolutely.
Thank you.
I think the point is that if it's 20,000 or 5%, then the 5% is the 5% that matters, and that's why we need to clarify, isn't it?
We do need to clarify. Yeah, it's just that you know, yeah, you understand what I'm saying.
It might be
the constitution must be the authorising document, and we shouldn't be putting permissions in a report that would then go against the constitution.
I think it might be
possibly. Could you Councillor Coleman send either Councillor Crawford or Andrew Busby that details of that query so they can clarify that?
Of course.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd say apologies. I did send it as an email, but I think it just was lost in the migration.
It hopefully shall be no more.
It is 20. About, sorry,
the abbreviation in the recommendation.
Oh, yeah. So in the recommendation, which it refers to JCT, which is I think some kind of a joint contracting tribunal, and perhaps we could just put that in full if that's right. Just for clarification for anyone who's not familiar with these terms.
I think that'd be helpful actually, because we don't actually define what that particular TLA refers to.
No,
we do for other things.
I mean, it's not a tangible thing for the report, but it does just clarify for anyone who doesn't know what that.
Thank you.
Do you want to clarify what it actually stands for, Andrew? So
yeah, it's joint contractual tribunal contracts, so JCT.
And that's just a process, is it? It's just referring to a process of letting a contract, is it?
It's a recognised suite of contract documents which have certain terms and conditions within them, where a number of authorities and construction companies use a suite of contract documents, and that's what it's referred to. So I can make that clear on the revised recommendation if you wish.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Legate.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I have a question to Andrew regarding paragraph 12, the tender process. So just today's deadline for quotation. I wanted to ask, just did we invite specifically some companies to bid, just on the project, or just announce the tender in general? And then, just because today's deadline, I wanted to ask, what's the current status? How many, just bids we received? Thank you.
Yes, certainly I can answer that. Thank you, Councillor. So this was a mini competition which was carried out through a framework, which is a pre-compliant framework, which has also already been gone out to market to make sure we secure the correct quality of contractors. 2 bidders expressed an interest in the project, and we have received 1 tender back ahead of the deadline of noon. It is quite common to have them received at the very quite close to the deadline. So we have received 1 this morning.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have any further questions? No. So, getting back to the recommendations, as laid out by Councillor Crawford, I have summarised them to a certain extent. So are we happy to approve the procurement process to appoint a main contractor for these projects, to delegate the award to the first stage reconstruction services agreement, and to delegate the contract for stage 2? It's all set out, written as the recommendations on page 21. And I would ask, is everybody happy to agree those recommendations today?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed, subject to just spelling out what JCT means, yeah.
Yes, minor amendments. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Fabulous. And so we're on to item number 8. And I believe that this is going to be introduced by Councillor Fulsham. We are looking at the corporate performance report and the climate action performance report for quarter 3, 23-24. So if I can hand over to you, Councillor Fulsham.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm delighted to bring this quarter 3 performance report. This is where we start to catch up with ourselves. So it's not as far in the distant past as some of the earlier quarter reports. It looks back for a period from October to December, so it should all be fairly fresh in people's minds. There's a very good summary on page 32 of your packs, which says some of the highlights of the stuff we were doing in the closing months of 2023. I'm delighted to say we've got Tim Arui with us online if we've got any questions. And I do want to thank officers for all their hard work in putting together this reporting. As I've said before, and Cabinet may be slightly bored of me saying it, we are looking at how we're reporting in future to make it more focused, more delivering information that's easy for our residents to understand and what they're really interested in. So the look and feel will change, particularly as we move into the new corporate plan period. I'm happy to take any questions, and I know Tim is online and can answer stuff that I don't have to at my fingertips.
Thank you, Councillor Fulsham. Very much appreciated. And yeah, you are right. It is very much sort of much more present, the things we're reporting here. And as I look around the room, I can see things that everybody has been involved in working on, and all the teams across the council have been working on. For instance, Councillor Pigdale's work with the Afghan relocations in the systems policy, the Arab scheme. That was sort of first initialised at that time. The new Egg Quality Action Plan was endorsed, and it's now since been approved through Cabinet and the Licensing Committee, which is brilliant. So there's a lot there. Obviously, looking back, it's when we started looking at the budget process. I know Simon and Councillor Crawford probably started much earlier. But yes, there's a lot of good news here. In my portfolio, we have the announcement of the Climate Action Fund Awards, and that's brilliant news. 14 different projects and over £50,000 awarded to those groups across the district. So I think there's a lot to be celebrated, but as we're not bored, don't worry. You can we all would be very grateful to see this reporting process improved, streamlined, and made more meaningful. And we're very grateful for your work in making that happen, and obviously to officers as well. We are aware that this is a great deal of work for officers every quarter, so we do appreciate it, and hope that we can work with you all to improve that system of reporting. So thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, I think it's again a really positive performance review. It's fantastic to see, and actually, you know, February was just documented as the warmest February on record globally as well. So, you know, it's stark figures, isn't it? And I'm so pleased to see that we are really tackling the climate emergency front and centre, and that our figures back up as well. My question is about the number of affordable home completions. Do we have an idea as to the type of demographic that's picking up these numbers? Do we know the need behind that figure?
It's a very good question. I don't have those figures. I mean, it's not actually something that falls in my portfolio, but I know those figures will be being collected in part with our social housing provider.
I think
The reason why I'm sorry, Chair, the reason why I'm asking is that I think it could, we are currently in our corporate planning for the next corporate plan, and I think sometimes these figures might be useful just as part of what we mean by affordable housing.
So that these are sort of questions we can be feeding into as we go through, and showing what we do want to be reported.
I hope that the new reporting format will actually give a high level summary and then supporting documents that will give. Caption first gives it the wrong feel, but actually the detail to hand that can actually inform our decision making in when we need to focus in on particular areas, and that is something I'm very much looking forward to bringing in. We're wanting to start measuring stuff in a quantitative as well as qualitative manner. We've got a lot of qualitative measures and commentary on stuff at the moment. We'd like to actually get to a system which I've painted as milestones and metrics. No, we celebrate the milestones. The milestones are very much the stuff on page 32 of the summary. But the metrics as well. How are we fitting? What's the profile of the people taking up the affordable homes? How does that compare to comparable councils across the country, to national stats? Because sometimes we can actually be achieving stuff and not realising that actually we're doing as well as we're doing. And also we'd want to know if we're actually falling short somewhere. We want to know about that before it becomes a problem so we can address it. So yes, quantitative as well as quality.
I totally agree, and it's about meaningful metrics as well. So the metrics that we want to ask questions, and those metrics should reflect the questions that we want to ask and get an answer for. Councillor Pickles.
Yeah, I think the thing about affordable homes is affordable home has a national definition which doesn't necessarily tie in with what we think is affordable, which is another issue, and that could include affordable rented social housing and all the different affordable spectrum, and the number completed in this context will depend on the planning application that was originally approved and how far the building and delivery of those developments has gone on. So it's got this sort of delay in it. So and what the profile of size of units, for example, and types of units will have been negotiated by planning officers with regard to the housing needs information for the district. So it's a sort of quite a long process. I think I've got that right anyway.
Well done.
Very much how I understand that.
So this is in effect planning application, building completions. And the needs are a lot earlier on, and
reflecting on also how Councillor Edwards started her question there is, it's like, yes, this is in the context of the warmest February climatic chaos. I mean, the weather is not acting as we expect. It's also in the climate, so to speak, of building stable finances, and how initially these are the very starting points of building on starting to build our budget and challenge our budget lines to get to the point we did last month, where we passed our budget, a balanced and strong budget, thanks to Councillor Crawford and the finance team.
And I think that is something that we have to bear in mind, that, yeah, these starting points 3 months ago or 4 months ago, that we can now look at the how that's developed since and how that's grown. So that's really good. It is good to reflect sometimes. So I'd like to, unless there's any other questions. Any questions? Oh, Councillor Gaber.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to support that, just it would be really good to start having, just to have metrics. I wanted to quote, it's like famous phrase of Peter Drucker from Boston Consulting Group: if you cannot measure it, you cannot improve it. So just kind of, just we need to have these numbers to make them visuals, and then just work on them. So, but again, great report.
Thank you. Very good point, Councillor Gaber. Thank you. Any further?
Can I just say,
Yeah.
I do strongly agree with that. I think we have raised that previously, but having that breakdown of housing delivery by the different categories actually would be very informative and helpful.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm sure that's noted. If there are no further questions, are we noting this, or are we all happy to note the quarterly performance?
Yes.
Yes, agreed.
Thank you. So that is our final item in the agenda. So I will call this meeting to a close. Thank you everyone for attending, and online. Thank you, officers.